Hello, everybody, and welcome back to High School Not So Much a Musical. Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of our two-part series with Kunaal Kapila, one of the co-founders of the drone tech startup COM3T Drones, along with 3 other co-founders, and one of them, our very own co-host, Nitin Jaladanki. In this episode, we'll talk about an interesting story over a legal intellectual property battle and how we addressed it. For anyone coming in without listening to part 1, COM3T Drones is an online startup that aims to revolutionize the drone education industry by shifting the focus to high schoolers. More on how we came up with the idea and how we found our target market right after this.
This is High School Not So Much a Musical, a podcast that takes you on a ride through the peaks and valleys of a high school journey. Here are your presenters, Nitin Jaladanki and Ayush Agarwal.
So we've obviously talked about all of the good parts of COM3T and the success that we had with finding funding and everything like that. So one of the parts that we don't really talk about through any of the interviews that Kunaal and I have done about COM3T are like the bad parts of it. So after the incubator was done, we sort of had no deadlines to meet, and we were a true startup at that point because there was nobody controlling us, telling us what to do. There was nobody giving us hard deadlines. There was no date that we had to pitch the ideas. There was nothing that was set into stone. And that was one of the difficult parts of being a high schooler and having your own startup. So Kunaal, could you talk to us a little bit about the whole ordeal that we had after COM3T Drones was done? After Quarter Zero was done, the problems that we ran into it, the team restructuring, the IP negotiations, all of that kind of stuff, and just tell them about some of the problems that we had after COM3T Drones was done.
Yeah, so Nathan is completely right. Like when you're a high schooler and you're not given any deadlines on something, you tend to procrastinate, and especially when you have other strong commitments, it's very hard to work on something as demanding as a startup, right? It's a whole company. So when Quarter Zero ended, we were tasked with building on with this startup, and we were sort of pressured by the sense that, okay, we just won this thing, we really need to take this to the next level. But with that essence of being in high school, school is approaching, and you have no hard deadlines, and other priorities are coming to light. As school is approaching, as aforementioned, it really got difficult to manage COM3T Drones along with the many other things. And with this came the typical like team conflict type of thing where, okay, like some people can't put in as much time as others right now. What do we do? And it kind of crumbled down into more conflict-based matters, which is obviously not ideal. You never really want that in a team situation, and it just became a very, very, very difficult task when it came to the team, when it came to COM3T Drones in general, and kind of ended up with a couple people leaving the venture and creating their own thing, and then Nitin and I staying with it. And then, that's really what it is at the present right now. But yeah, if you want to add anything onto that, Nitin, you can totally do so.
Yeah, so just to get a little bit more into the specifics, I won't put out names I won't put out other names. I'll just refer to them as the other people in the team. But after the whole thing was over, the first thing that we realized was we don't know who created what and what was individually of the 4 people of the team, what was created and who owned what. That's one of the things that I would advise you to do when you are starting your own startup. For anybody listening, clearly outline what's gonna happen in the worst case scenario that the team falls apart, because that's one of the things that we didn't do. We were assuming that all was well, we were all gonna continue working on this, we were all gonna have time, and that we were all gonna stay as one team, and that obviously didn't happen. And what ended up happening was 2 of the other team members just didn't have the same motivation that we did at that point. And the other 2 team members, they were basically at one point was we're going to take all the work that was ours, quote unquote ours, and they were just going to leave. So what we ended up doing at that point was I had to also be sneaky, just like they were. So they were like, we're going to take all the videos that we created, which was they were tasked with creating a majority of the videos while Kunaal and I worked on setting up the interviews, working on the drone kit, everything like that. So a lot of our intellectual property was taken away by the other group members. And that was some of the problems that we ran into. So whenever you're working on a team with entrepreneurs, you need to clearly identify what's going to happen in the case that the team doesn't fall apart or somebody wants to leave or stuff like that. Because what ended up happening was Kunal and I had to sit down and redo all of the videos that were technically ours. They were Comet's property, but people were just running away with them because they didn't want to focus on the venture anymore. That's one of the things I would recommend doing. Is that was like something that Kunal and I both learned was that you need to set in stone whose is what, because in the end, the whole team can fall apart within a couple of weeks, which is what happened to us. And that's a really important part of being entrepreneur, is always thinking about the worst situation, not in terms of your financials, not in terms of your equity or anything like that. It's all in terms of the team that you're working with. And one of the clear examples of this was we were watching a movie in entrepreneurship class this past week, and it was sort of about the starting of all the Silicon Valley companies. So Apple, there was Apple, there was Cisco, and more importantly, Cisco, there was this lady who was one of the co-founders of Cisco. And being the only lady in a time where it's 1980, some of the gender norms are still there, where a woman isn't really supposed to have a very high position in a company. And that was kind of the gender norms that were set back then. So what she had to do was she was overcompensating for herself by being really hard on her employees, being really hard on getting the deadlines done, and being really mean. And what happened in the end was all the VPs in the company basically said, we're not going to work if we're all going to quit if she doesn't get fired. So it's all about ensuring that you know what's yours, because she got fired and retired when she was only 35. So that was just a long way of saying, make sure that you know what's yours and that you talk with your team ahead of time, even if it's a little bit awkward, because there will be a time where you reach conflict and you don't want it to reach a pinnacle where the whole company is put at risk because of some people just not wanting to commit to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. In the position that we were, we didn't really have, completely set in stone roles as to who was who and who had, property and who had ownership over what. So definitely, I recommend like creating like a fail-safe route. If things go bad, people need to know who has what. So, someone who has malicious intentions doesn't just take away and run away with everything. People have access to what they made. And then, everyone can leave on happy terms. But yeah, totally. I agree with Nathan.
Okay. Speaking of intellectual property, I think one of the biggest intellectual property possessions that a company has is their website, because the unique design of their website can really make or break a consumer's perception of them. If I go on to, let's say, some sort of company's website and it's super hard to navigate. For example, my dad was complaining about the Indian government's website the other day, and how it's always down whenever he's trying to apply for any sort of OCI or anything. That can really make a consumer angry. So having a quick, effective website that whenever you press a button or submit a form, it's really responsive, or just in general when you're looking at it, it's aesthetically pleasing, is very, very important, because it's the first line a consumer sees. It's the home page of the first thing the consumer sees. So I think Comet's website is a good balance between, how in school, like, teachers are always saying don't put too much like text on your slides, focus on like images. I think Comet strikes a good balance of aesthetically pleasing but also informative at the same time, right? Because you don't want too much on either scale. So can you talk a little bit about how you chose the layout for your website and how you realized that like the format that you currently have is the best way to essentially organize the information?
Yeah, for sure. So I totally agree. Like, websites are probably the most important thing for a startup or any sort of organization in general. When you have a clean looking, aesthetically pleasing website, it allows the consumer to want to spend more time on your website and want to learn more, compared to a bad looking website. They just want to do what they want and get off of that. We went through many iterations of the Comet website. We went through, various hours of drafting, and we realized, our theme, the font, everything. We realized that, okay, this was like the best possible thing we could have for each and every single one. We included quotes, we included an about the team, every single thing that was, necessary on a website. we did that, and then we added our little own specific twist to it, and putting our images on there, putting the font that we preferred on there. And I sent the website. I'm not sure if others did this, but I sent the website to my family, and then they sent it to their friends so they could get a non-biased response. And they said the website was good, and they liked it, and they would spend more time on it. And then I sent it to my friends again to get a non-biased response. And then they said majority of them said they liked it. And then they would spend more time on it. Some of them gave some feedback, and we incorporated that feedback into the website, sort of to optimize it. But yeah, we sort of just went through hours of iterations on the website to find out what was best, what fit our theme the most, and what we should include, what we shouldn't include. We included the quotes of the people that we contacted. So pretty much just went through hours of iterations of it, then sort of went through the same sort of target market search, sort of asking people around, what do you think of this? Do you like it or not? And then, what they don't like, we fix that up. And what they did like, we kind of, put an emphasis on that.
Okay, so I can ask the next question. I think that we really touched on the really important parts of the business, except the actual business model. So Kunal, could you talk to us a little bit about Comet's business model and why we specifically chose the business model that we did, and what were the plus sides of the model that we did choose?
Okay, yeah. So essentially, Comet Drones is a platform that provides courses on the various aspects of drones, whether it be regulations, government aspects, or the integral insides of a drone, like the Arduino or the wings or anything of that. It combines courses on that with an actual drone kit that provides a very plug and play, very easy creation of a drone that sort of goes hand in hand with the courses. We realized this business model was effective when we were doing our market research. So most of the companies that sort of touched on drones were either teaching how to fly a drone or teaching how to build a drone. It was never anything that synthesized both. The many tutorials out there that sort of talked about how to build a drone were lackluster or low in detail. So we wanted to provide something that was easier for the younger groups, high in detail, and also educational on the side. Which came with the drone regulations, the career prospects, how STEM and how drones sort of coincide. So we combined the education factor, the fun factor of a drone, and the building factor of a drone, all 3 in 1 in a way, into one thing, which was Comet Drones. If you have anything to add on it, then you can go ahead and say that also.
Yeah, so the way that we kind of pitched our idea was there's 3 separate groups. There's the pre-built drones, which are your normal drones that you can buy for maybe $1,000, it ranges from $200 to $1,000. So they're big companies like DJI and Parrot. So that's the first section. The second section is just drone courses on how to build a drone and such. But the problem with that is it's so specific to building a certain type of drone, and the parts are so specific that it's really difficult to build a drone without having the hands-on experience with working with it. So that was the second group of people. So the people who have the companies that have a course but don't have the drone kit to go along with it. The third group of people was, if you go on Amazon, type in drone building kit, you'll be filled with thousands of different types of drone kits that you can find. And those range from anywhere from $220 to $450. And the problem with that is that it's just the pieces that, just like the Arduino, it's just the gyro scope that you need and everything like that. It doesn't have any of the actual stuff that you need. It doesn't come with the soldering skills, obviously, because you need to be able to solder. Which is why, as Kunal was saying, we went with the idea of combining both of the best worlds. So essentially what we came out with was, we will have a course that is built alongside with the drone kit that we're putting out. Within that course, we'll start off with what a drone is, how exactly it works. We'll talk about the main parts of a drone, so go through the building aspects of a drone. Next, we'll go to what the important parts of coding a drone are. Along with that, we're going to have the drone kit that they can use for each module of the course. And the best part is, we marketed it as plug and play drones. So the best part is, with our drone kit, you don't have to solder. And soldering is not something that's very accessible to high schoolers because it's very dangerous and it's high risk and stuff like that. Parents don't want to buy it, which is why we went with a plug and play approach. So that's what we basically took our business model. And this just goes to prove how important market research is. We went out and researched about all the different types of drone types that there were. There was, once again, just the kit, just the course, or just the pre-built drone, which don't offer the educational value that our kit does. And that's how we basically marketed and came to our business model of having both the course and the drone kit together that can be sold for one price so that the person is following along as they build the drone and they can learn a lot more from that.
Now,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, you can go.
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I agree with Nathan. I like the insight that he provided. Even further, I remember soldering being our main concern for teens' accessibility to drones, and removing that factor and making it more a plug and play approach. Gave us a super unique approach, and not only drones, but the educational aspect to it too, right? They can focus more on the engineering behind it, the STEM behind it, rather than focusing on the messy soldering and the more dangerous aspects of creating a drone. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so last week we actually did a podcast about storytelling and the importance of establishing a narrative in your business where the consumer can kind of relate with you and your own story, but also where you are talking about a problem that your target market can directly relate to. Now, from my experience, I definitely know a lot of people who are interested in like drone photography, but aren't able to, go into those specific fields because obviously, as you said, the cost of a drone is pretty expensive, right? It can be $1,000+, especially if you're going for some of the more advanced drones like DJI. So could you all talk a bit about how you approach storytelling and how you establish your own narrative in order to kind of essentially relate to the customer and kind of get those like mirror neurons firing? If you watched our last podcast, you know about that. Can you talk about how you essentially used your own experiences of not being able to find a drone kit for yourself and not being able to go into the drone market, and how those sorts of experiences actually ended up leading you to create the business?
Yeah, for sure. So in any sort of presentation, I believe that you need to open up with a sort of narrative-based thing. Like even in college applications, like in your essays, I opened up with majority of them, I opened up with an anecdote or a narrative or something that sort of would later relate to the general greater picture. It sort of grabs in the people you're speaking to and makes them more interested. It's a more unique aspect. It's a more unique throwout as to what you're doing. So many of us could relate to the anecdote that, okay, these drones are way too expensive. I don't have a drone because it's too expensive, and then I can't build my own drone because I don't know how, and the YouTube tutorials just don't suffice. So creating a narrative around that, and a more personal story, like something that starts with I, the pronoun I, like building a story around that. It not only draws in people, but it creates a very, very personal, a very personal story as to your presentation, and it's unique. It's something that they'll remember, and I think it's very, very important and imperative to carry a narrative around anything you're presenting or showing to someone. If you want to add anything onto that, Nathan, you can.
Yeah, so Kunal captured it perfectly. Just going out, like the first thing that we said on the pitch script was, I've been building drones since a very young age. We used a lot of pronouns like I, and the best part of doing that is you're basically presenting yourself with the idea that you're the best in this category and that nobody can do it better than you. And one of the really nice things that we worked on as a team within our script was we started off with an anecdote, as Kunal said, and the best part of that was it was storytelling. And with storytelling, you're able to get the reader in, or the listener in. And what we did at the end was we said that We're excited about the progress we made in such a short time and think that we're the right team to build this company, as we have gone through the growing pains of having to build and code our own drones, and that we reiterated that this is what inspired us to solve this problem, unlike other drone companies which don't resonate with the problem like we do. We made that really clear in the end. So the important part of storytelling, based off what Mr. Erickson told us, was it's about looping it back together so that the listener or the reader or whoever, the watcher, whoever is watching, is just saying, it's just everybody, it's just so that they get an idea that you know what you're doing and that you've kind of created a circle of your anecdote and start and ending with your credentials for it. So that was a long way of saying storytelling is really, really important. Like you said, and the way that we did it was through anecdotes and kind of giving some emotional experience to the VCs.
So, Kunal, we finish off every podcast with our tips question, where essentially we want to give you a tip to future high school entrepreneurs or future youth entrepreneurs or anybody in our school or in the greater Bay Area, whoever watches our podcast, is interested in starting their own company, but they're a little bit hesitant at the same time because obviously, as you guys mentioned earlier, it is a lot of work. So, Kunal, can you give some tips to some youth entrepreneurs who are rising up in our community?
Yeah, for sure. So the number one thing I took away, which we've already mentioned, is to never be afraid to ask people who are, more, older than you, right? Ask industry professionals. Adults are way more eager to help high school students than you think they are. Talking to them can give you great insight on what you want to do on your startup if they're in the same industry, and they can give you really, really good information on the market, and if your solution is viable or not. And not being afraid to ask them and being eager to talk to them is a very, very, very important principle in the ideation and creation phase. On a more general standpoint, I think not being afraid to go out there and create your own thing, and understanding that failure is likely going to happen at least once or twice in the initial phases. Understanding that it is going to happen is also very, very important. Using failure as like an inhibiting factor to wanting to create something is not a great thing, because you have to understand failure is going to happen, and you just have to use it as a stepping stone. Of course, failure happened with us once when we had our financial app idea and it didn't work. We were stuck in a very we were in a very bad spot at that time, but we understood that we have to use failure as a stepping stone into the next idea, the next thing. We had multiple little small failures within Comet Drones in the ideation process too. Okay, this website domain doesn't work. We can't just give up and quit then. We have to find another website domain. Okay, this Instagram strategy doesn't work. Okay, we have to do something else. Being able to pivot, on the spot and understanding, okay, failure is not the end of the world, is a very, very important principle in entrepreneurship.
So I think that this was a great podcast because it kind of allowed us to kind of reiterate our ideas of starting a business and the growing pains that we've gone through from start to finish. So we talked about the incubator and everything like that. So thank you so much, Kunal, for your time, and thank you so much for everybody listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much.
That's our show for today. Now roll the credits. High School Not So Much a Musical is hosted by Ayush Agarwal, Nitin Jaladanki, and Rishi Sinha. Narration by Samhit Padala. Music from Louis Luang Relaxation Cafe, Tune Pocket, and Infraction. If you like the show, please recommend it to your friends and family. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.